is Shirley Goodman. My maiden name was Newdell. My parents are Lillian and Harry Newdell. In 1957, I married Jerry Spitzer, had 3 children, Bob, David, and Kathy Spitzer. And then in 1977, I married David Goodman. And so my name is Shirley Newdell Spitzer Good.
I'm Esther Bognhoff. I'm Shirley's sister. My maiden name is Newdell also, and my parents were Harry and Lillian Newdell. And Bernie and I were married in 1952. We have 4 children, Sandra, Cindy, Adam, and Brian.
My name is Bernie Bognhoff, and my folks are Izzy and Georgina Bognhoff, and we were.
Your date of birth?
My date of birth is 11/25/33, and I was born at Nicholson Hospital, which is no longer in existence.
How about you girls? What's your date of birth?
7/6/36
And
here in
I'm-
Omaha.
And I'm June 29th, 1934. I think Lutheran Hospital is where we were born.
Tell me about the Newdell family.
My dad was a grocer. Mama says soon after they were married, he always wanted to have his own grocery store. And on 29th and Cummings, right across from Robert's Dairy, they had one of the little mom and pop grocery stores. There were many in Omaha at that time. And Mama often worked with Daddy at the store. Daddy has made a videotape. I made a VHS of him telling his story of coming from Russia, and before right after World War I, they came. And the grocery store was our whole life was around it. Esther and Doris, our older sisters, Doris Alloy, worked at the store quite a bit and helped Daddy and Mama. I was the baby, and all I did was eat candy when I went to the grocery store. So, what else do you want to know about?
Esther, tell me about your father, his
Well-
family, and so on.
Well, a little bit about the grocery store. They spent their first anniversary in that. They had bought in that store. They were married in 1928, and I did work in the store a lot. But the World War II is what stands out in my mind with the shortage of meat and other grocery products, and how we'd get so excited when the wholesale truck would pull up and we could restock. And the cigarettes. The people that got the cigarettes, they thought they were the luckiest people in the world. And my dad, as Shirley said, came over from Russia.
Where'd your dad and mother meet?
And I think at a dance hall here in Omaha. I think on a Sunday night, she said they had dance, the young
Jewish
single-
couples used to get together.
go to get together. And
What was your mother's maiden name?
Goodman. And I'm a Goodman. but the family took the name of Levine, many of her siblings, when they came over, and they came over after my grandmother. My mother's mother was Rebecca Singer, but Rebecca Weber Goodman Singer. So they were, we were told that the rest of the family took the name Levine because that's who sponsored them to come to the United States.
Where was your mother born?
Chicago. She was born in Chicago.
Bernie, tell me about your parents.
Well, my dad was born in Passaic, New Jersey in 1911. And
Let me hear more about the Nudell family.
Well, do you want to hear about Daddy coming from Russia? Okay, Daddy grew up in a small town of Mykolaiv, Russia, and it was near Kiev because that's where they would go to the market. And when they escaped from Russia, they crossed the Danube River. The people they paid to get them across into Romania. I think it was Romania. And I have tried to find maps of that time unsuccessfully. And so hope to meet up with people who can tell me how to find the town that he was from. He told stories about the Cossacks would come and they would hide. They had a false wall in the house, in the kitchen, that they could go behind, and then they often went to the cemetery and laid down in the gully when they got word that the Cossacks were coming. And they were very lucky to survive.
Who are the siblings of your father?
My dad has a brother. He had a brother, Ben Nudell. That was his younger brother. And his older brother was Hyman. And his sister was Razel Schwartz. And when Dad first came to the United States, they didn't live in Omaha. They lived in Ackley, Iowa, and they were in the junk business. Yeah, the scrap metal to make it sound. And we took Daddy one time coming back from visiting one of my grandchildren in St. Paul to Ackley, and he showed me the place where his house was, and he learned English from a German woman who lived next door to them, and she was a school teacher in the public school, but he didn't know enough English at first to learn, to go to the school, and she taught him his English.
How did he end up in the grocery business?
Well, he went to work for grocers here in Omaha. Louis Albert was one, and he talked so highly of him always. He was so nice to him. And then I think there was a Polanski grocer that he worked for. But he really had this inkling that he wanted to have his own grocery store. So when the occasion, I think that store at 29th and Cummings was for sale, they delved into it. But I remember most of my childhood was at that grocery store.
Where did you live at that time?
We lived on 31st and Lafayette, which was only about 5 blocks from the store, so we did a lot of walking. And we didn't know any better. That was the way you got from one place to another. We walked or took a bus, but we walked to the store.
Do you guys recall your grandparents?
Oh, I remember Grandma
Yes.
Singer.
Yeah.
Yes, she on Shabbos she would walk. It was more than a 2-mile walk over because Mama would be working with Daddy, and she didn't want us to be alone, and so she would come and spend Shabbos at our house, and I being the baby and at home most of the time. Well, Donnie's younger than me, but being my two older sisters took responsibility at the store. I was at home, and she was like my mother, Grandma Singer. She was my bubby.
Well, we were the 3 girls, and then when Shirley was 5, our brother Donnie came along. So he was pretty spoiled. We all took care of him, and it was great for us to have a little brother. We were all so happy about it. And he lives in Cedar Creek, Nebraska now.
And when he got older, he worked at the store with Daddy. And then Daddy was the store was just a few blocks from Tech High School. And Tech High School, at the time our mother was young and went there, it was a training school, and she came out a secretary and was able to get a job in an insurance company. But Tech High went downhill in the years that we were high school age, which was in the 50s, and the neighborhood got very rough, and the kids would come into the store and just destroy things. And Donnie said to Dad, we can't stay here. We can't stay in this situation. And Daddy was reluctant to give up the store. So Donnie stopped working for Daddy and went to Baker's supermarket and was in charge of the deli department. And then a year later, Daddy conceded that yes, it wasn't wise for him to have the store open there anymore, and he started working for Baker's also.
Bernie, I want you to tell me about your parents now.
Well, my dad was born in Passaic, New Jersey, and I believe in 1911. And I believe he came to Omaha before he started high school, or when he started high school. And he went to Central High, and then he got in the clothing business.
What brought him to Omaha?
I believe it was the Perlmans. My grandfather was a painter, and Izzy Perlman was a plumber. And I think they knew each other in Russia, but I'm not sure. I don't know. But, and then my grandfather came in about 1905, I think, or 5 or 6. And my grandmother, she didn't come until 1910. And then my dad's older brother and sister came with my grandmother. And then my dad was born in Passaic, and his younger brother was also born in New Jersey. It was Paul Bognhoff. And then I think they stayed there for a few years and then moved out, like I say, in Omaha when my dad was just starting high school. And my grandparents lived on 19th and Clark Street. And a funny thing about that was there used to be we went there every Friday. We'd have to go there every Friday for Shabbos. So I just always had trouble finding something to do. So there was a cobbler right next to the outlet, a shoe repair guy. And he had stacks of comic books. And I'd always go over there and spend the afternoon reading the comic books. Well, lo and behold, that was Esther's grandfather. And we found that out about 20 years later.
What do you remember about that grandfather?
Well, we didn't buy new shoes every time we needed a pair of shoes. We'd take them to him, and he'd put new soles or new heels on. And so sometimes we'd walk all the way down there to 20th and Clark or 19th and Clark and wait while he did it. Or if we had another pair of shoes, we'd send them home with my grandmother, and then she'd bring them back the next week. But
Well,
he had all the old-fashioned tools, and he learned in the old country in Russia, I guess, how to do this. So he was an old-time shoe repairman.
What are all of your memories of grandparents? The kind of people they were, the things they did, the things that you did when you went over there as children?
Grandma was a wonderful, sweet lady.
Yes.
The house was very large. They had a potbelly stove, a wood-burning stove in the kitchen, and they had chickens in the backyard. And she made her quilt, and her pillows were stuffed with the feathers from the chickens. And I just recently I threw away those pillows.
The feather tick on her bed. She'd have it all nice and fluffy, and we couldn't resist. We'd always go plop down on it. She didn't care.
And how about you, Bernie? Other than reading the comic book.
Well, first I can remember was we lived with my grandmother or my mother's mother, and that was in South Omaha on 42nd and L Street. And it was, well, there was no plumbing in the house. We had the old outhouse, and it was on an acre of ground. We had chickens, we had geese, we had everything else out there. And I can remember I went to school to the second grade there, and then after the war, my dad came home from service, and we bought a house on 50th and Capitol Avenue, and then I started school at Dundee, and went through that. But all I can remember is the dogs and chickens on that place in South Omaha.
L Street was unpaved.
Well, I watched them pave L Street from the WPA, and they did it with teams of horses and skips. That's how there's no equipment whatsoever. It was really, that's how I spent my summers.
And where did you girls go to elementary school?
Franklin. We went to Franklin School on 35th and Franklin. It was about 8 blocks or more from our house, and we'd come home for lunch also. Walked, so that was four walks a day, and then I'd walk to the store. So that I did a lot of walking.
And then in the winter time, the winters seemed to be colder then than they are now, and the snow would be way up on our legs, and that walk was a long walk. Aunt Belle, Mama's sister, Belle Goldberg, lived just a block from the school. So on a real cold day, I would stop at her house and warm up a little bit, and then continue on home.
Or have lunch there. Sometimes we had our lunch there.
Tell me about your mother's siblings.
Well, she had her sister, that sister Belle Goldberg, and then she had 2 brothers, Irwin Goodman and Joseph Goodman. Irwin lived here in Omaha, and he worked for the post office for many years, and he had a side job. He sold shoes at Brandeis. And
Their children, Aunt Jean was his wife, and their children were Danny, Harold, and Martin Goodman, and then Shirley was a late in life baby, and she was just a year older than me, and we were very good friends. She died in Cincinnati. She married Norman Goldenberg at a very young age. She was on dialysis for quite a while. Okay, then Uncle Joe stayed in Chicago. He wanted to stay, and he tried to live in Omaha, but it was just too small a city for him. And we're still close with his daughter, who is left, Joyce.
Joyce and Don.
Gail.
And they had, Uncle Joe and Aunt Jean had 2 daughters, Betty, who died of diabetes very young, and then Joyce now is, we keep in touch with. Now the email was wonderful.
Do you have a lot of cousins then?
Yes,
Yeah.
And you do stay in touch?
we do, pretty well, yeah.
Well, see, now my daughter Kathy has moved to Chicago. She lives in Skokie, and she's married to Joe Gluck, and they have 3 children, but she only lives like 4 blocks from Joyce. So when I'm in Chicago, and my mother still has a cousin in Chicago, Dorothy Goldberg, and she's my mother's first cousin, so she's up in the years, but I always make a point of when I go to visit to spend some time with her, too.
How about your cousins, Bernie?
Well, in Omaha, I don't have any, but we have a cousin in Kansas City, couple, and then I have a cousin in California. Well, actually, two cousins in California. And on my mother's side, I'm not quite as close with that side of the family as I really should be.
That was a huge family.
It was a big family, but my mother her maiden name was Jairus, and she was Catholic. And there was a little contention in the family in the beginning. And we just didn't stay as close as I should have. But we socialize once in a while, but
I think when Esther first started dating you and we would go over to your house on 51st and Capitol, Big Bubby was a big part of your life. She was a
yes.
the grandma.
She
Well,
lived with you.
we lived with her for the first, until I was
Not,
about 9 years old. We
This
lived
was your
with her.
mother's mother?
My
Yeah.
mother's mother. We
Tell me
lived with
about her.
She was to me, she was a big lady. And
We called her Big Bubby,
Yeah.
and then his father's mother was Little Bubby.
yeah. But she was married twice, and both husbands died young, very young. So she was by herself, and her first husband built a home on L Street, and that was before there was roads there or anything, and it was pretty primitive. But so we lived there for 9 years that I know of, and she was hard working, and at one time she worked at the
packing.
the packing house, but I was trying to think, there was a box company down there she worked for a while. And then she moved with us to Capitol Avenue, and golly, she lived to be 92, I think. So she was a big part.
Yes,
She
I remember her. She loved to clean. Oh,
Clean
she
and
was
cook.
she was always shining the glass on the in the dining room. They had beveled glass on the cupboards, and the house sparkled.
What kind of memories do you have as kids, grandparents cooking? Do you have memories of that?
Grandma Singer, my Bubby loved tea in a glass and black bread. That was a treat to her.
She made jelly.
Oh,
She always made,
Oh, okay.
we'd go over, we'd have to have a piece of bread and jelly. And they made their own wine. I never was let go down the basement to see that wine, but I know it was down there.
We had a storm cellar or a fruit cellar on L Street, and we would put half of the acre would be into vegetables, and we did a lot of canning. And the wood, we heated the place with wood. I mean, it was a wood stove, or well, I don't think we had coal. I think it was wood. And I can remember drying mushrooms.
Oh, my.
We would put a screen above the stove, a window screen, and put the mushrooms up there and just let them. They'd be sitting there for a week or two, drying out from the heat from the stove. And then she would use that in her cooking all year long. And just a couple jars of mushrooms would last the whole year.
Wow.
And if we needed a chicken, we went out in the backyard and got one.
Did you play any kind of a role in the gardening or the killing of chickens?
I was out there with her all the time. Yeah, I could. And there was you just pull it up and eat it. I mean, you just wipe it on your pants. The radishes and stuff. It was very enjoyable.
What are all your memories of elementary school?
Well, the teacher I remember was Mrs. Streitz. She was very, very tall, and I had her not only for 6th grade, but then when I went to 7th, we went to Franklin till 8th grade, right?
Right.
Okay, she became the teacher in 7th grade, I just remember her long legs. I had to look up. When I was in kindergarten, I wasn't a very good girl. Mama was very embarrassed. I wouldn't take a nap at nap time, and I would talk to the kids on the mat, and Mama was called up to school.
Oh.
And that was indeed a disgrace as far as my parents were concerned, because Esther and Doris were perfect students, and then I came along. That's why I had such this drive when after my kids were in school, I went back to college. I had to sort of prove to myself that I could academically equal my sisters.
Far outdid us.
So that I went to so I finished up. I have 2 master's degrees.
My biggest memory of grade school was South Omaha. We went to Ashland Park. At that time, it was the largest country school in the United States. And we had a teacher, I was in the 2nd grade, and she was sort of prided herself on being an artist. And she had this big mural painted on the blackboard. And we were dressed to go out to recess, and I had a snowsuit on and a little billed hat and I can remember leaning against the blackboard and erasing a little bit of her drawing. This teacher picked me up and put me behind the piano and left me there for the rest of the day. And I'd have still been there if it hadn't been for my sister to come and get me.
How about some of the kids that you met in elementary school? Are any of them still in your life, or do you remember them? Or
No.
Well, with mine, my doctor, I went to school with my doctor from grade school, high school, and I'm still associated with him, and he's still my doctor. And there's, from Dundee School, there's a lot of them we still go, I know, and, but it's nothing real close, though, but I do, know them very well.
how about when you got into high school?
Well, we're still in touch with a lot of those kids, of course. And my friend Lorraine Stein, she actually fixed Bernie and I up for her 16th birthday party. That's how we met. So, and I still see her every week, so we're very close.
Anyone that you remember, Bernie, especially in high school?
Well, yeah, I mean, I was very close to a kid right across the street from me. He's Jay Milder. He moved to New York, and he's an artist now. And, well, yeah, we got married very early, and we moved out of town, and we really kind of lost contact with some of our high school friends. So, and then it was just the people that I worked with or relatives that we really stayed close to.
But then you came back. How long were you in Denver?
Well, I was in Memphis first. We were in Memphis for a year, Denver for a year, then we went back for another year and a half to Denver. Later on.
When did you get married?
1952.
And what were you doing then for a living?
I wasn't doing anything.
They were just out
Well,
of high school.
that's why we went to Memphis. We
Bernie
started working for Foreman Brothers Plastering, but he, just as a bookkeeper. And then he did learn the trade later.
Yeah, but before that, though, I worked for Lynn Florist for a while. Earl Siegel, I'm sure you remember him. And then I got in with Foreman Brothers and learned the trade, and I retired being a plasterer.
That profession really changed over the years, didn't it? From really actually being a plasterer to
Yes.
to drywall?
Yes, yeah.
So you were doing both?
Well, towards the end, yes, you had to just survive in the trade.
But Bernie did the house before this house, he did some beautiful work. He did all molding, but he did it the old-fashioned way. And there,
All by hand. We had molding all the way around, and our whole house was plastered. So, but not this one.
When they remodeled the Orpheum Theater, I got to do a little work on that, on the cornice and decorative work there. It was very, but they just don't do that anymore.
well, when you asked us the question, people you remember from grade school, high school, one person who was constant in, that I remember, was Larry Schwartz. And they lived right behind us. So I knew him from grade school, and I knew him in high school, and he married Jean Cutler, and he became a physician, and he passed away quite a while ago, but
What are
That's
your
one
memories
person.
from Central High School and the Jewish Community Center?
Oh, every day you went to the
Yeah.
Jewish Community Center after
canteen
school.
down
That was just something you did.
well, even when we were in grade school, we went to Hebrew school over at the center.
That's right.
So we were familiar with the center. I mean, it was like it was just a place to go in most of our lives. And I remember very little taking swimming lessons, and everybody else learned how to swim and were ready to go off the diving board, but not me. And I wasn't going to be left behind. And I went off the diving board and had a little trouble coming up. and I still don't know how to swim. Many times I have taken lessons trying to overcome this. So, and I must have been I couldn't have been more than 8 years old at that time. So the J was part of our life always.
Yeah, that's where I learned to swim at the J also, and Manny Siegel was the athletic director, I guess you'd call him. And I can still remember the way he taught me to swim was he put a big pole in front of me and kept having me reach for it. And that's how I learned to swim, just reaching for that pole. And then Manny Kreitstein would help him, and I remember him real well down there. But it was always something to do athletically down the J. There was always something going on, basketball, softball, or something.
Were you working in that plaster trade when you first left Omaha, just after you got married?
I was a bookkeeper for the plastering company, and it was Foreman Brothers. And then we finished the job in Memphis, and then I actually went to work as a laborer for them. And then I got into the Plasters Union as an apprentice. And I served 4 years, well, 3.5 years, learning the trade, and then I worked in the trade ever since.
Did
And
you
then
keep busy year-round?
I was very fortunate, yes. And then Dave Foreman passed away in, I think in 1956, I believe. And then his brother-in-law took it over, Harry Fernstein. And I worked with him until he retired. And then Bob Kelly and I and another man took the business over. And I worked with that for about 5 years or 6 years, and then I went on my own. And then I retired about 10 years ago.
What were family meals like at home? Both families. This is before you got married, growing up as kids.
Always had salad with iceberg lettuce and mayonnaise was the dressing.
My mother would go to the store every day about 4 o'clock, so as soon as we got home from school, she would leave, and then she always had the dinner all cooked already, but she'd call at 6:30 for us to turn the fire under the potatoes. They were all peeled and everything, but and then they didn't get home till they closed the store at 7, so we didn't eat supper till about almost 7:30 every night. But we had a home cooked meal every night.
Mama was up early in the morning making things ready so that all we had to do was heat things up or make the salad or things like that.
At home, the meals were sort of, my dad was always going somewhere. I mean, the meals were kind of ragtag. I mean, very, very seldom did we have a planned sit-down meal. It didn't seem like it. He'd work late, he'd be off to a ball game or something. The meals at home don't, the main meal that I remember is Friday night going over to Clark Street. And then when my dad went to the service, we still had to get on the bus, transfer, and go over there every Friday night. And at that time, we had a hot water heater that was not automatic. It was either on or off. And I can remember several times when we'd get over to her house on 19th and Clark, and my mother would say, I don't remember if I turned the gas off. So I'd get on a bus, first it would be a streetcar, then a bus, go all the way home to 50th and Capitol, check the hot water heater, and then go back over there. After our first daughter was born, we moved to Memphis, Tennessee to work for Foreman Brothers. And we packed everything we owned in a 1947 Plymouth and took off with Sandy. And there wasn't room for anything else in the car except what we had. So we get down there, and we stopped in, well actually, they packed us, Esther's mother packed us lunch. So we got a 700-mile drive, so we stopped for lunch in Glenwood, Iowa, 20 miles down the road. So that's the way the trip started. But a day and a half later, by the time we got to Memphis, it was dark, and we went in, it was a rented house that
Bernie had been there.
I had been there, we rented the house. So we put Sandy in bed, and we couldn't find any blankets or anything. And so I said, well, we'll just throw the newspaper over her. So we did. So years later, we were telling the kids about that. So Sandy, when she went to school for show and tell, she was telling them how poor we were, that we didn't have blankets. We had to use newspaper. And that's a true story.
How long did you spend in Memphis then?
We were there a year.
And from there you went where?
We came back to Omaha for about a week and then went to Denver.
This was still with the same company?
Yes. And we spent about a year in Denver. And then we came back to Omaha and spent about 3 years here, and then went back to Denver again for another year and a half. And then we've been in Omaha ever since.
Well, before they went to Denver, Bernie went ahead first, and Esther and Sandy, as I remember, was very young.
Oh, yeah.
And Daddy and I drove Esther and Sandy down.
No, Memphis. We came home, Sandy and I came home with Bernie's folks. They had come to visit, and then Shirley and my dad drove us back.
To Memphis.
To Memphis.
Yeah.
And that was the first time I ever, the roads were terrible. There was red mud. It was just awful. But that was the first time I ever experienced true segregation. And I went into I talked Daddy into stopping at this store, and I went in and looked at some of the things in the store, and the lady that was talking to me had this very deep Southern accent, and I just, coming from Omaha, I assumed she was a black lady waiting on me. Not that it mattered, but I just, and then I looked up, and here's this very pale-skinned white woman talking to me. And then Esther told us the stories about how they wouldn't let the blacks on the bus in the front of the, and there were different water fountains. That was a real shocker for us coming from Omaha.
It was a shocker. The children that lived on one side of we had a little house, had to go to the black school even though it was further away.
No,
Yeah.
for the white school.
Well, and the white children had to go to their white school. It didn't matter what school was closest to your house. That's what decided where you went, is what color you were. It was shocking.
In the pay scale, you'd have a lather doing the same work, and yet if he was white, he'd get 50 cents an hour more than the black guy. And that's the way the rules were down there, and you had to follow them.
It was
Really eye-opening.
a government housing project, so you had to follow. These were federal rules. We had to
That was in
follow.
1953. So it was really segregated down there.
I'd like you to tell me about all of your children.
I'm gonna start with me. Okay, my oldest boy is Bob Spitzer. He lives in Alexandria, Virginia. His wife is Sharon. She was Sharon Goldstein. She from Omaha. They have 2 sons. Alex is the youngest, and he just graduated. I just went for his. He just finished his first year of college. I just went for his birthday a month or so ago. And their older boy is Joel, and Joel loves trains. Since he's been a very little boy, he's always been fascinated with trains. Bob works for the Department of Agriculture in D.C., and he went to Johns Hopkins University. And then my second son is David Spitzer, and he lives in St. Paul, Minnesota. He's married to Suzanne, who is originally from New York, and they have 2 daughters. And Emily is the older girl. They're both in high school, and Natalie. And I make a point of going to visit grandchildren on their birthdays. So they come here once or twice a year, and I go there every birthday for a grandchild. And then my daughter, my youngest, is Kathy, and she's married to Joe Gluck. She's a physical therapist. They live in Skokie, Illinois. They have 3 children. I have their oldest girl is Yael, and she wants to spend her senior year of high school in Israel next year, and I don't know how that's going to work out, but that's her plans right now. And Avi's 15. He's wrestling. He's very tiny, so he's very determined. They have a hard time finding someone equal in weight. And Renan is 13, and he's interested in the theater. The Jewish Center in Skokie has a very active theater, young kids theater. And so all 3 kids have either taken parts in productions, or they've worked in the stage settings and such. And then I married David, and when he had 2 children who were both grown at the time we married. Doug is his son, Doug Goodman, and he lives in Boston right now. And Deborah lives in San Francisco, and David just had bypass heart surgery, and she's here helping me. That's why I'm able to be here this morning, because the surgery was 3 weeks ago, and so I've sort of been, he calls me Florence Nightingale. So that's and Deborah has a daughter, Katie.
Okay. We have 4 children. Sandra was born in 1953, and she has 2 children, Samantha and Emily. Sandy graduated from UNO with a homemaking degree, and then she went on to Creighton Law School. So she's an attorney. She hasn't been practicing for several years, but that's what she did. She's married to Howard Friedman, and he was in the home building business. And then we have Cindy, who was born in 1957, and she recently got engaged to Morris Friedman, so we're going to have a wedding. And she's the Human Resources Director at CSG here in Omaha. We have Adam. He was born in 1961, and he's unmarried, but he works for State Farm in their claims department. He's been with them for a long time now, since out of college. And our youngest is Brian. He was born in 1963, and he's Nebraska's top cop. He's an Omaha police officer, and he just recently got the federal honor as one of the top police officers in Nebraska. He's married to Jennifer, and she's also a police officer. They have, between them, 4 children, Zach and Courtney and Josie and Eli. So our grandchildren range from 22 down to 6 years old. So we enjoy every one of them, and they're just wonderful to have.
After we moved to Capitol Avenue, about 6 months later, my dad got drafted, and he went in the Army, and he was in the Army for about 2 years. And then after the war, when he came home, we would always, every Sunday, we would go down to the J, and there was basketball games to be played. And he thought he was still a young kid, I guess, until this one time, I can remember it so well, that he's driving for the basket, and Clayman and Napomnick or someone else sort of blocked his way, and that was the last time he played basketball. He played a little softball after that, but not much, never basketball again. And then he always, he always had what they called the bagel run. Every Sunday he'd go get bagels and drop them off. And I also have my older sister. She was born in July 28th, 1932. And after high school, she worked at Nebraska Clothing Company until they closed, and then she worked at Haas Aquila. And she was also very instrumental in taking care of my mother and my grandmother after they got sick.
I want to say at the end goodbye, and Bob, David, and Kathy, and your families, I want you to know I love you. Bob and Suzanne, and Natalie and Emily. Bob and Sharon, Alex and Joel, David and Suzanne, Natalie and Emily, Kathy and Joe, Yael, Avi, and Renan. I love you, and every week at Shabbos I say, Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha, Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'chunecha, V'yasa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. I love you.
We're going to end this video now, and I just want you all to know how much Dad and I love you. Sandy and Howard, Samantha and Emily, Cindy and Morris, Adam, Cindy, and then we got Brian and Jennifer, Zach, Josie, Courtney, and Eli. And we are going to add, when Morrison marries Cindy, we'll have Alan and Michael. We love you all very much.